UFOs with Marty Garza, the spookiest story never told, Part 4.
Hey.
You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And we have a long-awaited Marty-sode, UFO Part 97. Which one is this, Marty?
UFOs Part 13.
13.
But it's Spookiest Story Never Told Part
4. Right. So, Part 13.
So 13-4.
Spookiest Story Never Told Part 4. So, do you want to give us a hint?
This one was about a year in the making.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because of the way that I've been writing the Spookiest Story series, I'm jumping back and forth. There's some stuff that we probably won't cover till next year. I've already been working on. So it was pretty important. But what's different, or maybe not so different about this one, is that it has absolutely nothing to do with UFOs. Or it totally does. One or the other. It depends on your perspective.
Okay, well, I've read it, and I can see the parallels for sure. Like, I can see the connections, at least some of them. I see the connections to, I recognize all kinds of stuff. The Fae,
Yeah.
So, I'm not...
Yeah, it's long. It covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
This is sort of a downshift. Last time we were shifting gears. This is a downshift to shift into what we're going to be covering in the next episode. Like, you have to have some basic framework to understand where some of the concepts come from. This is kind of like an analogy would be like compressibility, just like an aviation term. That's that transition phase between subsonic and supersonic, where the wind traveling under the wing is subsonic, but the wind going over the wing is supersonic. So they get a shudder, and pilots have been lost, aircraft have been lost, in the early days trying to break that sound barrier, and they figured out that they had to blow through it. This is sort of our attempt to blow through that barrier to be able to hit our stride and move forward.
All right. Listen, you can tell he's a racer. We're shifting gears. We're revving it up.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Well, like always with these Marty texts, we start with a quote. Some persons believe each star to be a world, and this earth an opaque star, on which the least of the gods presides. From De Inferno by Anthony Rusca, written in 1621. And then we have what is this? This is a definition. Demonstrate, a noun, proof that something is true by mathematics, reasoning, logical deduction, or practical experiment. From the Latin word.
I like the etymology there. That's cool.
Yeah, demonstrationem. D, which is of or from, plus monster, to reveal or ordain, derived from the word monstrum. A thing that evokes fear and wonder, a divine omen or evil portent, which are both derivatives of monir, to admonish, advise, warn, instruct, and teach. So in a chapter dedicated to drivetrain development, in Marty's book Monster Truck Technology, he discusses a historically significant individual named Girolamo Cardano. Born in Italy in 1501, Girolamo Cardano was a famous inventor, a polymath, a physician, philosopher, and astrologer. He received his medical degree in 1526, but in 1534, he accepted a position as a lecturer of mathematics at the Platt Foundation in Milan. He wrote several books on the subject and is considered the greatest mathematician of his time. He was the first to develop mathematical formulas using the square root of negative numbers and developed the concept of probability theory, better known as the calculation of odds, which he published in his book Liber de Ludo Aliae, or Book on Games of Chance. In 1543, he became a professor of medicine at the University of Pavia, where his father, Fazio Cardano, previously taught geometry. Girolamo's uncanny proficiency as the world's first recognized medical diagnostician earned him widespread accolades, and he was at one time considered the best doctor in the world, for among many other things, curing the Archbishop of St. Andrews of his near-fatal, decades-long battle with asthma. This notoriety resulted in job offers from several royal courts and even Pope Paul III. It should be noted that in his capacity as a physician, Girolamo advocated for the education of the deaf, arguing that their brains functioned normally and were equally as capable as those with natural hearing. Girolamo's father, Fazio, was a lawyer and a brilliant mathematician who was mentioned in the Codex Atlanticus by his personal friend Leonardo da Vinci. Fazio was a very strict father who taught Girolamo arithmetic, geometry, and astrology. He was not only a major influence on Girolamo's intellect and philosophy, but was often the subject of his writing. In De Varietate Rerum, or The Variety of Things, Girolamo wrote of Fazio's encounter with a domestic demon he referred to as a folletto, or a sprite. A sprite is described as a small magical creature of humanoid form, often described as a trickster. One night, while sitting in bed awake, Fazio felt the cold press of a small hand on his forehead. The hand slid down his face and attempted to stick two of its fingers in his mouth. Startled, Fazio shoved the spirit away, listening intently for its return. 30 minutes later, it made a second attempt, although this time more delicately. Fearful, Fazio jumped out of bed and was chased all across the house by the spirit. Of this encounter, Fazio stated, "I was convinced that it was trying to enter my body. The astonishing fact was that, although my lips were tightly sealed, my teeth and my face were still able to feel the coldness of its fingers, for it was clear to me that its body was aerial." Coincidentally, nearly a century later, the most famous literary sprite was given the name Ariel by Shakespeare in his classic work, The Tempest. In the story, Ariel, which is Ari, a lion, and El, or Elohim, of God, a spirit of fire and air, is bound by the master magician Prospero to serve as his invisible spy and protector, intervening at various points through subtle influences and plots against him. Regular listeners may remember that in Brothers of the Serpent, episode 213, we discussed how the character of Prospero is believed to have been based on the infamous Dr. John Dee. So although this demon continued to harass Fazio, he was fortunate to possess vast knowledge of occult disciplines, to the degree that Girolamo wrote that his father had such great expertise in necromancy that he surpassed everyone in our time. Given this occult knowledge, much like Prospero, Fazio was able to bind the demon, subjugating it into his service. This led to a 28-year relationship with what came to be widely known as Fazio's familiar spirit. I think this is amazing. This is a mathematician, right? And a doctor. Yeah. It's great. Okay, so the idea of the familiar spirit, this demonic thing, it also sounds very Fae-like.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay, so in Fazio and His Demons, author Dr. Guido Giglioni writes, "This demon, as long as Fazio kept him bound, gave him truthful responses. Once he released him, however, he kept returning, but gave him false answers. Whatever the matter, during all the time he remained bound, the demon appeared at ease, and at least he confirmed that demons exist, for he investigated everything diligently from them. He was not always alone, though. Sometimes he used to come with friends." So he there is the demon? Is that what he's saying? That the demon used to show up with friends?
Yeah, exactly.
Be that as it may, Fazio's demon was not the only non-human intelligence with whom he conferred. In De Subtilitate Rerum, or On Natural Phenomena, Girolamo wrote that, according to his father's memoirs, in August 1491, 7 men made their customary appearance in his home. Clearly, these individuals who were suddenly manifest were not ordinary men. 2 were dignitaries draped in silk robes with glistening red chest plates and purple boots. Another was taller and fresh-faced and flanked by 2 others. Another was smaller in body and pale, shadowed by 3 additional men. All 7 appeared to be between 30 and 40 years of age. When Fazio asked who they were and from whence they came, they answered that they were, so to speak, people of the air, and they were themselves much closer to the gods than the human race, but were still separated from the gods by an almost infinite gap. Their higher abilities meant that nothing of the hidden things is concealed from them, and the least wise of their race acted as daemons, or geniuses for the most important of mankind. So this is very similar to some of the descriptions we read in, fairy faith in Celtic countries, that these people would say, we're between humans and the gods, right? Very similar description.
Very similar.
Yeah. So despite this, their ability to aid mankind was somewhat restricted, and they were permitted to bring us nothing to our advantage or detriment apart from specters and terrors and then knowledge. When asked why they could not reveal more, they replied that for anyone to pass this on to humanity was prohibited by the private law under extreme penalties. Nevertheless, there were those of them who chose to instruct men and communicate their skill, reward and cherish, and sometimes, again, terrify and punish to keep them in awe, as they thought it fit, coveting nothing more than the admiration of mankind. So this is saying what? That there is, what private law prohibits them? Who sets this law up?
Who is above them?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
They're acknowledging that they are down the food chain. There's something more powerful than them.
Right. That can exact extreme penalties on them. And then this next bit is saying that these beings, at least some of them, covet nothing more than the admiration of mankind. So the idea that some of them would show up, at least in ancient times, and proclaim themselves as gods, right, is an interesting concept, because then you're getting worshipers, and that's what they want.
Exactly. Some appear to defy the law.
Yeah. Okay. They were nevertheless mortal, although their lifespans were hundreds of years longer than that of humans. But they were also not the only visitors from other realms present on our planet. They claimed that there were others who were smaller of body, 300 disciples, and another 200 in a public academy. On this occasion, the visitors remained for approximately 3 hours, during which they discussed philosophical and spiritual matters. Fazio claimed that, when questioned on the nature of our existence, the tallest of them denied that God had made the world from eternity. On the contrary, the other added that God created it from moment to moment, so that, should he desist for an instant, the world would perish. And we've mentioned this before, right? This has been brought up before.
Yes.
That creation is
some of these things we've touched on in other episodes.
Right. I remember this particular thing with that the creation is a continuous thing. Okay. Fazio's experiences and philosophy would have a profound effect on Girolamo's worldview. And despite his best efforts to intellectually rationalize and downplay his father's portrayals, Girolamo's earlier writings seemed to convey a cognitive dissonance and a denial of his own experiences. Yet, the clues that something supernormal was occurring in his life were sprinkled throughout his many texts. For example, he wrote that while in Venice in April of 1531, he witnessed 3 luminous orbs, or suns, casting broad beams across the sky, stating that the spectacle lasted for 3 hours, far longer than may be attributable to the atmospheric optical phenomenon of parhelion, better known as sundogs. By the time he was in his early 30s, what?
Hang on just a second. Let me catch up on
your slides there. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. I got a little bit behind. I was in the middle of something else.
Marty, we're doing a show right now. he just gets distracted. What are you playing video games over there?
Yeah, I feel like I'm juggling over here trying to stay ahead of some of these things that are going to develop as we go along.
You got some cool slides. Is Troy working on these with you?
Yeah, Troy helped me produce some of these things, and
yeah, well,
some pretty interesting stuff.
Again,
You're in good hands.
Yeah, you're in good hands with Troy. I got to give a shout out to, like, many people have asked where the YouTube art is coming from for the episodes. Troy is a genius, and he's been making episode art for us, and it's fantastic. So a lot of Marty's slides here are from Troy as well. It's great.
Yeah, he's really, really good at. I was trying to do some of them, and he's like, "Here, how about this?" Like,
you're just like, "Oh,
perfect."
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So he saw the orbs.
While we're taking a break from the flow here, we forgot to mention the Watcher who is joining us. However, he is in the middle of his shift in space.
Yeah.
It's
he's on space shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, currently the traffic here in space is being friendly.
All right.
But Marty, super glad to be able to be in another episode with you. I'm not going to take any time away from it, but man, these are always my favorites.
Oh, cool.
Always great to be here. Great to have you on with us, because your insight is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, Professor Shy is going to be sad. You told him his were your favorites, and now Marty's is back to being your favorite.
If you have to chase down any space crashes.
Content.
Yeah.
The Giants content was completely new to me, which was cool.
Yeah.
I've got lots of favorites. It's really hard to pick. We have such great guests. So, how do you pick a favorite?
Well, yeah, Marty is definitely one of the favorites for sure. We've been waiting for this for a long time. But yeah,
absolutely.
Professor Shy is going to be sad. That's all I'm saying.
Professor Shy.
All right. Let's see. So while in Venice, he saw the orbs. Okay. By the time he was in his early 30s, Girolamo began to recognize that visions he experienced while dreaming seemed to manifest in his waking state shortly after. He noted that the more imminent the event, the more clearly the vision was observed in his dream. As these visions persisted over decades, he eventually began to connect them with other anomalous experiences in his life, such as what he described as intuitive flashes of direct knowledge. This ability spilled over into his medical practice, where, much like the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, Girolamo exhibited a mystifying ability to intuitively diagnose illness. Of this, he wrote that the good fortune in my practice seemed to have come from divine help and not from my own great learning. As he gradually came to terms with these experiences, he increasingly began to reveal them publicly through his works, to the point where in 1557 he wrote, "No one should tell me that I am too credulous if I recount things that can hardly be believed." In De Vita Propria Liber, the book of my life, he wrote, "When I was a young man, and even now, when I am abruptly aroused from sleep, everything in my bedchamber appears to be bathed in luminosity, but soon this force spent itself and faded." But that was just the beginning of a bizarre, lifelong relationship with the supernatural. In the book, he goes on to elaborate upon a continuous string of strange experiences. He noted, "As I lay awake, awaiting the striking of the customary hour, I spent whatever time there was in the presence of an agreeable visitation, for I used to vision, as it were, diverse images of airy nothingness of body. They seemed to consist of very small rings, such as composed vests of chainmail. These images arose from the lower right-hand corner of the bed and, moving upwards in a semicircle, gently descended on the left and straightway disappeared. There were images of men of diverse costumes and varied dress, images of flute players even, with their pipes, as it were, ready to play, but no voice nor sound was heard." And he went further, stating, "Besides these visions, I beheld soldiers, swarming peoples, fields, and shapes like unto bodies, which even to this day I recall with aversion. There were other phantoms which I no longer remember. At times I could see a veritable chaos of innumerable objects rushing dizzily along en masse, without confusion among themselves, yet with terrific speed. These images were, moreover, transparent, but not to such a degree that it was as if they were not, nor yet so dense as to be impenetrable to the eye. I was not a little delighted with my vision, and gazed so raptly upon these marvels." Before long, Girolamo began to become aware of an altogether different form of manifestation. Of this, he wrote, "I am conscious that some influence from without seems to bring a murmuring sound to my ear." And he soon recognized that this murmuring often brought with it a portent, and that these differing manifestations appeared to originate from a singular source, one which would intervene at many critical junctures throughout his life. This type of source has throughout history been recognized by many names: genius, daemon, spirit, specter, muse, jinn. All of these labels refer to a form of non-human intelligence with a peculiar propensity to intervene in the lives of human beings. Of the nature of such spirits, Girolamo wrote, "But we will be in a position to say that childish interests are for children, minor ones are for ordinary people, public ones for magistrates, territorial ones for kings, and so it is with gods. For that is the Latin word, more than genii, clevi, diavi, minds, intellects, intelligences, or angels. Aristotle calls them primary substances, principles, and souls. But on a true and Latin interpretation, though an uncommon one, we can call them intelligences." Girolamo also recognized that not all of these intelligences appeared to have the individual or mankind's best interests in mind. In the Book of My Life, he observed, "Attendant or guardian spirits, the Greeks are wont to call these angels. Nevertheless, in Latin, the word is spiritus, are recorded as having favored certain men constantly, as I have elsewhere noted. Socrates, Plotinus, Synesius, Dio, Flavius, Josephus, and I include myself, all, to be sure, lived happily, save Socrates and me, yet even I, as I have just said, am favored with the best of circumstances. But Gaius Caesar, the dictator, Cicero, Antony, Brutus, and Cassius, evil though dazzling fates attended." We briefly discussed Socrates' demon in Brothers of the Serpent episode 186, where we referenced its propensity to say no when he was about to do something wrongful or displeasing to the gods. It should be added that during his trial in 399 BCE for corrupting the youth of Athens by philosophical paradoxes and of introducing new gods or of denying all gods, in his refusal to desist and repent, he instead stated, "It may perhaps appear strange that I should go to and fro, giving advice and busying myself about these things in private, but that in public I should not venture to go up to give counsel to the state before your assembly. But the cause of this is what you have heard me say often and in many places, that a voice is present with me, a certain agency of God, somewhat divine, which indeed Miletus, his prosecutor, has caricatured and put into the indictment. Now this began with me from my childhood, a certain voice which always, when it comes, turns me aside from that which I am about to do, but never impels me to do anything. Of this I have sure evidence, for it cannot be that the accustomed sign would not have opposed itself to me if I were not about to do something which is good. But this is clear to me, that it were better for me to now die and to be set free from troubles, wherefore the sign has in nothing opposed me." So he's basically saying, this thing has been telling me my whole life, no, if it didn't want me to do something, and it hasn't told me no with the things that have led to this trial. And so basically I'm supposed to die here. That's kind of what he's saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've heard this before.
Yeah.
In the series, we've heard of other people that have this compulsion to follow at all cost.
Right. Follow at all costs, which is interesting here because what he is following is only when it tells him not to do something. right? He's
Right.
basically saying this. It
doesn't force him to do anything.
Yeah.
It just tells him when he's making the wrong. There are some, this thing is super long, so I had to try not to, embellish the stories too much, but there are stories about him getting feelings like there was a particular time where he was walking with a group of people and they were walking down the street and he got this feeling that he needed to turn, and they were actually going a certain way, and he said, no, we need to go this way. And shortly after, the people that kept going got trampled by bulls or something. So
oh, wow.
There were other people that saw this, this spirit would tell him, no, like, don't go that way. Or it was constantly intervening at different points in his life. And, he was very convinced that this was a real thing.
Look at him. He's definitely giving us the bird in that picture.
Whoever's
looking at him, he's just like, yeah, you can fuck off right now. Okay. There was something else I wanted to mention here. So Girolamo is basically saying he thinks he's got something similar.
Yes.
Right. But not only that, but he's becoming more aware of his dreams. At least he has certain ones that are very important.
Right. He's recognizing that. Well, we're
He's
going to. This will be explained shortly, but
here we go.
Yeah, he's recognizing that this is
just say it, Marty.
It's not. It's not. Yeah, we'll get to that shortly.
That's great. Yeah. So you're basically going through how he's writing in here about how, okay, I began to recognize this. I'm having waking visions, right? These visions upon waking after dreaming. Like he's saying, I'm laying there in the few minutes I have before I need to get up, and I have these visions in my room.
Right. Some are visual, some are auditory.
Yeah.
They're different forms of manifestation.
Yeah. Okay. So, it is unquestionably clear that Socrates was fully committed to martyrdom over the reality of his daemon, and there are even anecdotal accounts from witnesses to the prophetic accuracy of its influence upon him. Other examples of these external influences as referenced by Girolamo may be found in the Enneads from the life of Plotinus, the first Neoplatonic philosopher who lived from
Plotinus.
Plotinus, sorry. The first Neoplatonic philosopher, 204 to 270 CE, which contains the following account. An Egyptian priest who came to Rome and wanted to see a display of his wisdom asked Plotinus to produce a visible manifestation of his own companion spirit evoked. Plotinus readily agreed, and the evocation took place in the temple of Isis. The Egyptian said it was the only pure spot he could find in Rome. When the spirit was summoned to appear, instead a god came, and not a being of the spirit order. And the Egyptian said, "Blessed are you, you who have a god for your spirit and not a companion of the subordinate order." So the companion of Plotinus was a spirit of the more godlike kind, and he continually kept the divine eye of his soul fixed on this companion. It was a reason of this kind that led him to write the treatise On Our Allotted Guardian Spirit, in which he sets out to explain the differences between spirit companions. Treatise,
yes.
In On Our Allotted Guardian Spirit, Plotinus also explains Plato's doctrine, which he describes as each soul is a universe containing many different levels of reality, on any one of which we may choose to live. The principle, then, on the level above that on which we choose to live, next above the principle which is dominant in us in any particular life, is our guardian spirit. If we live well, we may rise to its level in our next life, and so have an even higher being for our spirit. So the perfectly good and wise man, who lives entirely on the level of intellect, will have that which is above intellect, the good, for his guardian. In other words, Plato believed that before birth, each individual is given a choice of lives, at which point they are assigned a guardian spirit. This spirit is both ours and not ours, serving as guardrails to keep us on our chosen path. It also accompanies our soul during the intervals between incarnations. Then, in our next incarnation, our soul receives a new spirit, good or bad, commensurate with our merit, a concept known in the Buddhist tradition as karma. However, as A.H. Armstrong, professor of Greek at the University of Liverpool, wrote, Plato also believed some souls may ascend to the stars, and these have star gods for their guardian spirits. This belief could be interpreted as a variation of Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, and altogether these may also be representative of the familiar image of the angel and demon, or good and evil, standing on each shoulder, whispering in one's ears. An example of the negative extreme may be found in the life of Marcus Brutus by the philosopher, historian, and priest of the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, Plutarch, who provides us with the following account. Thus, one night, before Brutus passed out of Asia, he was very late, all alone in his tent, with a dim light burning by him, all the rest of the camp being hushed and silent, and reasoning about something with himself and very thoughtful, he fancied someone came in, and looking up towards the door, he saw a terrible and strange appearance of an unnatural and frightful body standing by him without speaking. Brutus boldly asked it, What are you, of men or gods? And upon what business come to me? And the figure answered, I am your evil genius, Brutus. You shall see me at Philippi. To which Brutus, not at all disturbed, replied, Then I shall see you. Shortly after, in October of 42, the Caesarians defeated Brutus's army on the battlefield in Philippi, after which Brutus took his own life. As it relates to the Temple of Apollo, Girolamo also questioned the nature of the divine illumination exhibited by ancient oracles and the motivations of those who dabbled in such practice, noting, Thus it appears that demons have some power or foreknowledge, but much has been effaced through the scorn. The scorn has come about because most people who put trust in these skills have not only come to a bad end, but have achieved nothing of note in their skill. This has happened not so much because the skill is shallow, as because of the rashness of its practitioners who have promised themselves much through this expedient alone. But those who excel in arms or learning of some skill seem to have gained significantly from these practices. So what is he saying here? That being able to foretell things doesn't help the people who can foretell, but it does help other people?
It depends on what their objective is. In other words, if they try to exploit it, it seems to never turn out well.
Yeah.
But people that use it for other means, for furthering some other interest, or he's effectively saying, notice that people that excel in arms, militaries, it works for them, but it doesn't seem to work well for some of the mystics.
Right. So it works to fight wars, but not anything else.
Right. It works in certain ways.
Yeah. Well, we need to take a break.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to think about that.
We'll be right back.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Thanks, Marty.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. UFOs Part 13. The Spookiest Story Never Told, Part 4.
It's simple.
Very simple with Marty Garza. Always keeping it simple and straightforward here on Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. Thank you for that, Marty.
Watcher had to leave, sadly.
Yeah.
He was He had an emergency in space.
Yep, had to transfer to Jupiter's moon from the moons of Uranus.
He had to change his orbit. But in honor of him being here, I was going to read his last comment, which was up there a minute ago.
Sorry.
He made a comment on when we were talking about Socrates, given Secret Bird. He said, well, whoever he's flipping off at it coming, because his spirit didn't tell him not to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
This is a great observation from the Watcher. Okay. Where are we at here? Power of foreknowledge. Okay, here we go. So, of his own attendant spirit, Girolamo noted, for the genius could warn me openly, through a dream or through a manifestation even more evident, but the mysterious warning perhaps was more powerfully indicative of divine protection, as were those even more startling warnings which came to pass, fears, hindrances, premonitions, and ominous sounds in fearful moments. Ominous sounds. As a result of the traumatic death of his eldest son in 1560, Girolamo experienced an increase in the intensity of his prophetic dream activity. Much like Carl Jung, who would selectively study 12 of Cardano's dreams nearly 400 years later, Girolamo analyzed and divided dreams and visions into four distinct types: digestive, humoral, anamnestic, and prophetic, and determined the latter to be the rarest and the product of incorporeal and superadded causes, i.e.
Incorporeal.
Incorporeal and superadded? What is that? Superadded causes, i.e. supralunar intelligences of divine origin, and are not even dreams in the strict sense. He also acknowledged his inability to conjure such visions at will, stating, "This power is present when needed, but not in evidence when I so will." By this point, followers of this series should easily recognize the striking similarities between Girolamo's descriptions of his experiences and those offered by Nikola Tesla, discussed previously in Brothers of the Serpent, episode 291. Like Tesla, from Girolamo's scientific pragmatist's perspective, to psychologically deal with these experiences, author Dr. Guido Giglioni wrote, in order to avoid the same mistakes his father Fazio made when dealing with demonic apparitions, Girolamo devised an ingenious set of criteria meant to test the reliability of demonic witnessing. He argued that the reality of demonic apparitions could be proven through rational arguments, direct perception of the senses, and reliable witnessing. As a result of his personal experiences and spirit communications, presumably in addition to those of his father Fazio, Girolamo began to develop and write extensively of a philosophy similar to those reached 500 years later by Charles Fort and William Bramley, in which global human events have been and continue to be influenced by forces outside of normal human perception. Girolamo wrote, "Nobody should doubt that celestial influence exists, that is, an occult force by which all mortals are ruled." He further elaborated on this view, stating, "There have been spirits instructing mortals in what was yet to come through dreams, through the actions of the lower creatures, through fateful events influencing us as to where we should go, luring us on, now appealing to one sense, now to several at the same time, and the more excellent for this, sometimes communicating through natural events, and finally through the supernatural, which we deem the highest of manifestations." This was a belief also held by Plato, who 1900 years earlier in Critias wrote, "They, the gods, tended us, their nurslings and possessions, as shepherds tend their flocks, excepting only that they did not use blows or bodily force as shepherds do, but governed us like pilots from the stern of the vessel, which is an easy way of guiding animals, holding our souls by the rudder of persuasion, according to their own pleasure. Thus did they guide all mortal creatures." Yeah, that is very similar to Fort and Bramley, basically saying there's this occult force that has been subtly steering, the fate of the human race since forever, since the beginning of time, and probably before that.
What if it's us, dude?
You mean it's like a group of humans doing it?
No, I mean like,
It's our higher selves?
yeah,
Yeah.
like all of it.
That's great. That's like the best troll in the, in the history. Like, all right. You're like,
It's the future us's.
Excellent.
I'm. It's kind of funny to say it like that,
Yeah.
but I'm actually serious.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, this idea that this was mentioned earlier in this text, even that each person is giving a guiding spirit, right? And that guiding spirit is based on its level is based on your level of enlightenment. So it's just a little bit above you at all times, right? In each life. And then you're given a choice of lives to lead, and you pick one. And then your guiding spirit is there to give you all the synchronicities, the dreams, the little signs and symbols, all of these things that are seeming coincidences are supposed to sort of subtly influence your decisions.
But there's
That's why I said it function. They function as guardrails. They're not steering you necessarily, but you have a certain amount of free will. You have some play. You can still, derail yourself, but they're there to guide.
Yeah.
Be a guiding force.
And all of this implies some kind of strange set of rules, right? This seems like a very complex and weird system. And so like everybody's like everything involved, including the higher spirits, seem to be playing some kind of game. Like that there's a series of rules here. And we're players in this game, but we're not really aware. Part of the rules are we're not allowed to be aware of all the rules.
yeah.
And we'll be exploring that, of what that game might be, and
But there's more than
possibly why there are rules, or what the rules are all about.
I know the subject here is the guiding spirit, but I'm saying there's more than just that. Like you have other entities that are outside of your guiding spirit that are influencing you as well.
Yeah.
That maybe the guiding spirit doesn't necessarily have control over.
Yep.
Opposing forces.
Yeah.
Or are they? Are they opposing forces? Yeah, it does seem like there's some kind of
Differing objectives.
Yeah, differing objectives. But they may all be playing a game. And it's possible. Like just like, somebody who believes in the choice of lives, like somebody who believes, for example, Heather, who we had on, to talk about her, the Akashic records and everything. She would probably say that you chose your life, and the trials and troubles and everything, the suffering you go through is something that your
higher self needs.
Your higher self chose for, for some reason, to learn, to grow, whatever. So it's possible that everything is actually playing by the rules, including the things that seem to be opposing forces. They're doing their job.
Right. That's very Platonist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, I guess I'm a little, I don't think it's predetermined. Like, in other words,
they're not saying it's predetermined. We still have free will.
Well, I mean,
You can still screw it up. In other words,
You can still slam through the guardrails.
zero mistakes. Totally on purpose. Yeah. Yeah, I was just
you
thinking
don't
like,
have to listen to them.
no, I mean, in the, say, like in the beginning, before you become a human or whatever, part of when you go into the physical world, choosing something because you need to experience that life, that sort of is suggesting that there's a knowledge of what that life is going to entail. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I see.
I'm talking about, like, I don't think that it's, I think the future's too big, right? I love that idea. Like, the future's too big for the present. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, the future is unknown because the universe hasn't completed the computations
Yeah, it's
yet.
like a strategy. There's like this big strategy game taking place, kind of like the game you're talking about, and it's like, okay, like choose this, become these people or entities because we're attempting to achieve this type of goal, and then hope for the best and guide through the process, but the future is unknown. That's all I'm saying.
Right. That still works with this concept, because
for sure.
We just don't know what the objective is, right? If the objective is to level up, then all sorts of things can happen. There's all the trials and tribulations that you experience along the way are not necessarily predetermined. It's just part of the path you took, and everything is there's always this cause and effect, and it's and it's splitting off. You get into this quantum reality where there are all these different scenarios playing out, but the objective might still be the same, just to level up.
Yeah, and but there's like social contagions, like take like the I don't know, the Salem witch trials or something, for example. Like this idea that like, you have this like crazed
hysteria or something.
Or even like the Great Awakening, part 1 and part 2. What causes that? Is that like, could that be like an actual agenda?
It could be so that it's like symptomatic of opposing objectives.
Yeah.
In other words, each individual is following a path, but those paths cross, and sometimes in order for one to achieve its goal, it interferes with the other's path, and there's this constant overlay between all of these, and then on top of that, add in that if there are these guiding forces, and some guiding forces have one objective and other guiding forces have a different objective, they may purposely throw wrenches in each other's plans. So it just gets exponentially more complex as all the interplay between all the different moving parts. It becomes so overwhelming that you can't see the patterns anymore. It's just almost like chaos.
But there is a pattern, right?
There is a pattern. It's just we're just not capable of comprehending it.
I wonder if it's...
I love this idea. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
Well, I just wonder if there's, we've talked about this, the fate versus destiny kind of thing, where it's like you have free will, but it's similar to walking a path. Like, let's say that you're going to go hike the Appalachian Trail or something.
Sorry.
You gonna make a joke?
Boring. I'm just kidding. Yeah. I don't know why. I just thought, but keep going.
Yeah. So you're gonna go. Well, the trail is there.
Yeah.
I mean, you can draw it on a map, and you're like, I'm gonna go hike this thing from here to here, but you still have no idea how it's gonna go and what's gonna happen, right? Even though you have your trail, your path.
That's a good point.
So it's like you're walking a path. You've made the choice to walk this path, but nevertheless, you have no real, you still can't predict the future, right? And so it's like, both can be true at the same time.
Yeah, I also like the idea of they know not what they do. It's like there really is a veil. And like the higher self on one side, it has a really tough time actually understanding or comprehending what the lower self on the inside is actually experiencing.
Yeah.
There's something missing in translation. So the guide is like trying to decipher these little bits of information and like, I don't know. So it's like there has to be like that story is basically saying like, it's easy to understand it from this side, but from the inside, you can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. And we all experience.
And you're saying it could be the other way around.
It could be the other way around.
You don't know what your path is. You don't know. Since you don't know what your path is, you don't know whether you're still on it or not. And you may have gotten off of it a long time ago and not even known this. And there may be these subtle, that we're talking hypothetically, right? In this scenario, there could be this superlunar force that's trying to steer you back onto the trail that you inadvertently took the wrong turn on. And it's trying to steer you back. And then you encounter these things like, why does nothing seem to work out for me? Well, maybe because you got off your path. You just didn't realize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like the idea that gods would conspire to like try to send a liaison here to figure stuff out and then communicate it properly back.
Yeah.
And then the communication is like, yeah, you just don't understand.
Right.
And because they don't actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, they didn't understand from the outside.
Yeah.
It wasn't clear to them that we don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think, so that's a great point. Like, the question then becomes, what is exactly their interaction?
Yeah.
Their level of interaction. Like, think, what was it? Was it Interstellar? Where he gets stuck in the...
Yeah, he's in the bookshelf.
Yeah. He first has to figure out what he's even looking at.
Yeah.
It's this incredibly complex thing because he's seeing it in this sort of time, like a deconstructed time, right? And then once he figures it out, and he's like, then he's able to make these weird manipulations. Mm-hmm. And so his daughter's experiencing it as a paranormal phenomena, right?
Yeah, like a poltergeist.
So this is like, what is their view of the realm that we exist in? And it could be this incredibly complex geometrical thing. And they're like, okay, if I poke this thing, and they poke it, and you're like, wow, the clock is 11:11 right now. And they're like, oh, that's not what I meant to do. It's like,
I think we're going to see as we progress through this that these concepts are extraordinarily old.
Yeah,
we seem to think that we've advanced so much, and that we have this pride that we're in science, and we've figured all these things out, and as if these are all new concepts. I'm like, no, they're just rehashes of things that people were discussing long ago.
You mean I didn't just come up with that idea?
What, Marty? What are you trying to say right now?
Let's move forward and let's find out. Let's see how many of the things we just talked about come up.
Okay. Throw lower creatures, nurslings, and possessions. Okay, I think this is where we were right here. So in a chapter titled "A Digression of the Nature of Spirits, Bad Angels or Devils," of the intensely researched, massive 500,000-word tome Anatomy of Melancholy, published in 1621, author Robert Burton of Oxford University wrote, St. Thomas, Guillaume Durand, and others rant that they, the spirits, have understanding far beyond men, can probably conjecture and foretell many things. They can cause and cure most diseases, deceive our senses. They have excellent skill in all arts and sciences, and that the most illiterate devil is more knowing than any man. They know the virtues of herbs, plants, stones, minerals, etc., of all creatures, birds, beasts, the four elements, stars, and planets, and can aptly apply and make use of them as they see good, perceiving the causes of all meteors and the like. They deceive all of our senses, even our understanding itself at once. They can produce miraculous alterations in the air, and most wonderful effects, conquer armies, give victories, help, further, hurt, cross, and alter human attempts and projects as they see good themselves. Burton goes further, offering curious yet strikingly familiar observations regarding the conduct of these spirits, noting, aerial spirits, or devils, are such as keep quarter, for the most part, in the air, that they can assume other aerial bodies, all manner of shapes, at their pleasures, appear in what likeness they will themselves, that they are most swift in motion, can pass many miles in an instant, and so likewise transform bodies of others into what shape they please, and with admirable celerity and swiftness remove them from place to place, that they can represent castles in the air, palaces, armies, and spectrums, prodigies, and such strange objects to mortal men's eyes, cause smells, savors, etc., deceive all the senses. Most writers of this subject credibly believe that they can foretell future events and do many strange miracles. All right, well, that was a UFO connection, for sure.
Does any of that sound familiar?
Yeah, it kind of sounds familiar.
So they can actually make nuts and bolts appear.
That's what Vallée would say in his books too. He said it's both spiritual or consciousness-based and physical manifestations.
How does it work?
Yep.
What are the rules?
We'll get to that.
I want to know how it works. Are we actually going to get to that? I didn't think that was
Yes,
possible.
We're going to get to that today.
What do you mean this has no connection to UFOs? The first time you said that, you're wrong. But the other ones.
They're talking about demons. I don't know what you guys are listening to.
Okay.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah, aerial spirits and devils. That's what we're talking about. Okay, in his unfinished work, Summa Theologica, written before he died in 1274 CE, St. Thomas Aquinas also wrote extensively about the reality of demons, but questioned their ability to truly manifest miracles. He concluded, properly speaking, miracles are those things which are done outside the order of the whole created nature. But as we do not know all the power of created nature, it follows that when anything is done outside the order of created nature by a power unknown to us, it is called a miracle as regards ourselves. So when the demons do anything of their own natural power, these things are called miracles, not in an absolute sense, but in reference to ourselves. So this is great because this is
Doesn't that sound familiar?
yeah.
I'm stuck. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, that's just like, you know, every time we say, well, there are rules here, let's figure them out.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, yeah, we see it as a miracle, but that just means we don't know enough about natural powers of nature. He thinks the demons
They're
are
not supernatural.
They're not
They're
supernatural.
natural. We just don't understand
Right.
them.
yeah.
Yeah, he was making this argument 700 years ago.
It's super knowledge. It's super. It's beyond our knowledge.
Advanced technology.
So
it appears like magic to
Yeah.
us.
I know this is kind of way off, but I just got hung up on the idea of like making, like just making materials appear. What's the precision level? Like what are the tolerances? Like, can you make a piston inside of a cylinder, like perfectly precise, manifest
just
itself?
imagine-
What are the
okay,
threads
we're
on
talking
the
about
nuts and bolts?
complexity. All right.
Are they metric?
How would that compare? Imagine if you're going to use that as the yardstick of, well, what level of precision can they create threads or fine threads and coarse threads? Okay,
Yeah.
how much precision is involved in creating a cell?
Oh
a
my
human
God.
cell?
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, touche.
Wait, why is that a good
But
point?
because it's
I'm lost.
a ridiculous level of precision.
It is, yeah.
Beyond any machinery
Machines
we're making.
Machines comprised of machines comprised of
Well,
machines.
yeah, the cell is like, I mean, the biology essentially is machinery. It's chemical based
Yeah.
machinery, nano machines.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this would explain why like the spacecraft sometimes don't appear to have nuts and bolts because they're not needed. You're not disassembling it; you just assemble it out of thin air or whatever, and
Yeah.
there's no parts.
Yeah.
For example, I don't know. I just went off on that tangent in my head. So
Like if it's manifested in some way where it just is
yeah, you're not assembling it,
right. It doesn't have to be manufactured.
So you don't have threads,
Right.
Yeah, but like what his point is like that's and your precision level is the equivalent of like making biological life. So you've got, you can use proteins and like put proteins together into incredibly complex.
Yeah, it's an atomic precision level.
Yeah, it's basically the precision
and
level of the
following
universe.
that, keep in mind that there could be varying levels of ability involved.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes
Sometimes
Just like
they
they
are
build
builders.
machines. So we build machines that build machines.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not good at it. Those are the ones that like squirt metal out while they're trying to fly.
Right.
And the other ones are like, whoa, bro. Like they all kind of come up and they're like, okay, you did this really badly. You're squirting metal.
Some of them went to the Nepha School of Demoneering, and those guys are top notch.
Demoneering. Okay. Foretell. Let's see. I keep losing my place. Here we go. Reference to ourselves. Okay. So in this regard, Robert Burton provided readers with the following curiously familiar descriptions of said miracles. But these are most erroneous paradoxes, rejected by our divines and Christian churches. 'Tis true they have by God's permission power over us, and we find by experience that they can hurt not our fields only, cattle, goods, but our bodies and minds. Many times men are affrighted out of their wits, carried away quite, and severally molested by his means. Yeah, there.
That sound familiar?
Yeah, they're
Cattle,
molesting the fields. Yeah.
Carrying people away.
Yep.
Molesting them.
Yeah.
The reason that I put this in there, I should have said this at the beginning. I had planned to do it, but recently, a very prominent ufologist, who I respect, have quite a bit of respect for, very knowledgeable, surprised me by stating that he did not believe that the phenomenon was as old as people believed. He was suggesting that it was a roughly 1930s and more recent phenomenon, that he thought that he was arguing that some of the older accounts are like pareidolia, that we're just connecting things that are not really related. They just might appear similar. So I went out of my way to find quotes that like, okay, well, was this just luck that he named these things? Or if you listen to these quotes, because I was very selective of which quotes I used, they're being pretty specific.
Yeah. Yep. This guy's best. It sounds like he's mentioning crop circles, cattle mutilations, and then, of course, abductions.
He says they can travel many miles in an instant.
Yeah. Experiments on people that have been abducted. The fact
molesting,
that
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Affrighted out of their wits.
Yes. Castles in the air.
Castles, armies.
Yeah.
There's a lot more coming.
Swift in motion and can pass many miles in an instant. Assume other aerial bodies in all manner of shapes at their pleasure. Yeah. And according to this guy, these are spirits he's talking about, but
exactly.
But what does this even mean? This is his
labels.
Yeah, labels. Okay. In accordance with such observations, Girolamo recognized man's tendency to interpret these forms of supernatural manifestations through the filter of one's own biases, which therefore leads to errors in reason, fear being a major factor in such errors. He wrote, accordingly, many monstrosities are begotten, because the life-giving powers of the sun have been checked. So, if the divine principle or instrument is thwarted by a certain earthly essence of the flesh, imperfections result, and a confusion of understanding of future events is conveyed through the spirit's manifestations. He further stated, likewise, there are good and evil spirits. It is accordingly foolish to choose to be disquieted by things which must be revealed in this manner. It is more foolish still to wish for signs which are obstructed in so many respects by human purposes, thwarted through the commonplaceness of that to which we have long been used, and by our blind judgments. And if revelations through such channels would truly predict future events, would you be able to profit thereby? And if false, what use are they? Yet these premonitions through the medium of my good genius are as gifts from liberal-hearted men, who are able to give many things which it is not lawful for us to receive. Given his interpretation,
he pretty much just said what Kyle said a few minutes ago. That you don't understand. You're looking at it from a human perspective.
Yeah.
You have this bottom-up look, and you don't really understand because you're viewing everything. You're through the filter of a mortal human.
Yeah, imperfections result in a confusion understanding. A confusion of understanding is conveyed through the spirit's manifestation. Yeah, he's basically saying because we're human and we have all of our own internal biases and stuff, you can completely misconstrue what they're trying to do.
And he's also kind of restating what he said earlier. And he's saying, if these were really prophecies of future events, might you be able to profit from them? So I think he's suggesting that they are not always accurate, or that there may be done for other purposes that you don't quite realize.
Yeah. Yeah, he says, if false, what use are they? Right? And yet these premonitions are like gifts. they are able to give many things, which it is not lawful for us to receive. So I think he's implying right there that they're kind of circumventing the rules sometimes, right?
Rule, exactly. Yeah. He's suggesting that there are two sides.
Yeah.
One side that does not want these things to be revealed.
Yeah.
And the other side that is breaking the law, the rule.
This is the brotherhood.
By providing this information to mankind.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Enki story where he goes down and talks to the wall.
Yeah.
Before the flood.
Yeah.
He's like, so they made a pact. There was a rule. Don't tell man.
Yeah.
And he knew Utnapishtim was behind the wall. So he's like, hey, wall.
Yeah.
Build a boat.
Yeah. Yes. That's what I was saying.
That may come up.
It's, what was I going to say? It's similar to
break
yeah, it is almost break time as well. But yeah, it's like the Watchers.
This is going to be a 6-hour episode.
Yeah, I can tell. Well, hold on. We're at least 1/8 of the way through this document. Yeah, we need to take a break. All right, we'll be right back. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent Podcast, UFOs Part 13 with Marty. Spookiest Story Never Told, Part 4. And we are continuing along through this document. I'm wondering if we're going to have to split this into 2 parts, Marty. UFOs Part 13, Spookiest Story Never Told, Part 4A.
Snake Bros episode
323. Yeah. UFOs Part 13.
Spookiest Story Never Told. Part 4A.
It's very simple.
Yes.
Okay. Given his interpretation of such a reality, much as we do today over half a millennium later regarding the UFO phenomenon, Girolamo also speculated upon the origins of such intelligences, offering the following familiar sentiment. What surprises me more is that the air and ether are of such a size, and the region concerned is so charming or magical, and we can see that the earth possesses its living things, and so it hardly seems likely that there should be such a space up there utterly devoid of life. What we should rather believe is that there are animals there, as much excelling these lower ones, since we can see that nature has adhered to this in the case of the other elements. We should believe that this whole machina, or mechanism and environment of the upper air, is full of these animals that we call, as it were, wise demons. Yep. So he's basically saying there is intelligent life in space, right? Sort of.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the skeptical argument is that it wasn't until the development of science fiction that people started thinking about this idea that there were aliens. See, and he's talking about aliens, but what did he call them?
Wise demons. Yeah. Likewise, we find that even in the 17th century, claims of supernatural encounters were met in a similar fashion to those of the 20th and 21st centuries. As author Robert Burton wrote, "If any man shall say, swear and stiffly maintain, though he be discreet and wise, judicious and learned, that he hath seen them, they account him a timorous fool, a melancholy dizzard, a weak fellow, a dreamer, a sick or madman. They condemn him, laugh him to scorn, and yet Marcus, of his credit, told Cellus that he had often seen them." Yeah, I've been called a melancholy dizzard for talking about it. I definitely have been called that.
I called one earlier today.
Michael Cellus, a Byzantine Greek monk, philosopher, and historian, wrote in his Dialogue on the Operation of Daemons, that Marcus was a monk in Mesopotamia who was an initiated inspector of demonic phantasms and who, accordingly, told him many extraordinary things about daemons. Reminiscent of some modern-day ufologists who speak quite authoritatively concerning the various types and origins of alleged extraterrestrial visitors, Marcus wrote us of 6 specific species of daemons. First, he mentioned the Liliurium, a name which signifies igneous or characteristic of fire. This order of daemons haunts the air above us, for the entire genus has been expelled from the regions adjacent to the moon. The second occupies the air contiguous to us and is called by the proper name aerial. The third is the earthly, the fourth the aqueous or marine, the fifth the subterranean, and the last the lucifugus, which can scarce...
Lucifugus, yep.
Lucifugus.
Lucifugus.
Okay. Lucifugus, which can scarcely be considered sentient beings. He further stated, all of these species of daemons are haters of God and enemies of man, and they say that the aqueous and subterranean are worse than the merely bad, but that the Lucifugus are eminently malicious and mischievous, for these, said he, not merely impair men's intellects, but by fantasies, from the Greek word phantasia, which means to make visible, and illusions, but destroy them with the same alacrity or willingness as we would the most savage wild beast. The aerial and earthly, with art and cunning, stealthily approach and deceive men's minds, impelling them to unlawful and unnatural lusts. For when we are in an imaginative spirit, approaching by virtue of their spiritual nature, they whisper descriptions of sensual delights and pleasures, not that they actually emit distinct sounds, but they insinuate a sort of murmur that serves with them the place of words. Of curious note to some listeners, Marcus also claimed that beings of the divine and celestial order were represented by the equilateral triangle, as being consistent with itself, and with difficulty inclinable to evil, whilst human beings were represented by the isosceles triangle, as being in some measure liable to error in their choice, yet capable of reformation and repentance. On the other hand, the daemonic tribe were represented by the scalene triangle, as being at variance with itself, not at all approaching excellence. Girolamo also cites skeptical arguments against the celestial origins of daemons or demons, and further speculates on the potential for evil complicit in the exploitation of knowledge from such intelligences on the part of man. He states, I am a philosopher, adhering so far as possible to peripatetic or Aristotelian views. They do not admit demons, and the view that accepts them in such a huge space is improbable. They would be like the birds here, and much more crowded, yet hardly a trace appears once in a whole province and over several years. If not, what stops them from destroying the human race, as they are invisible and under no one's control? It is well to know just one thing, that no honest person can claim to use demonic aid in contempt of God. And on our own decision, this is surely the action of an utterly ungrateful person, and we can see the people whose interest themselves in such things, we can see the people who interest themselves in such things, or those who are driven mad by their deceptive persuasion. If there is an alternative, it is that they are highly ambitious on the evidence of their sacrifices and their nature and power. By the 1560s, Girolamo was one of the most widely read philosophers in all of Europe. This attention, however, had an unwelcome consequence. On October 6th, 1570, at 69 years of age, he was arrested by the Inquisition of the Catholic Church on suspicion of spreading heresy. 3 days following his arrest, he posted a bond that allowed him to remain imprisoned in his own home throughout the trial process. It is noted that upon arrival, immediately after the door to his room was shut, suddenly a terrific blow struck it, resounding near and far. He wrote, the next instant, even as we were gazing, the shock leaped across to the window frame, on which the sun shone in dazzling light, with a similar percussion, and there rattled against the window and the lattice as if the fastenings were creaking. Startled, Girolamo took this as a portent of his inescapable fate. However, unexplainably, he suddenly felt a sense of consolation wash over him as the anxiety he felt regarding his inevitable execution faded away despite remembering that previously he had not been able to endure even a moment in confinement without seeming to suffocate. He later confessed, "In prison, my guardian appeared to me and my youthful associate at God's bidding, I believe under the guise of those violent sounds, in order that he might confirm me in my hope of divine favor, whereby I should escape death, and that all those trials which I was suffering should seem less hard to bear. I know that my angel was a spirit of power from these cases in which the manifestations were witnessed by others at the same time as myself, or in which two senses were engaged by the vision, as when the apparition said to me, 'Te sin casa,' or 'You are without a home.'" The primary point of contention in his writings was that regarding celestial influence, which the Inquisition interpreted as a counter to that of free will. Inquisitor Gaspare Sacco stated, "When Cardano speaks of celestial influences, he so exaggerates them that he denies that God can act in inferior or sublunar things. He denies the power of demons and calls the blessed martyrs crazy and driven by celestial influences into losing their property and life for the sake of uncertain things. Cardano thereby put celestial causation over and above the authority of God and Church." In reading Cardano with the Roman Inquisition, author Jonathan Reiger, or Regier?
Yeah, right.
Reiger, states that Girolamo defended his position by stating that demons have no such physical power in the world. If they did, they could destroy their human enemies and offer great help to their allies. If chance ruled, there would be no order, yet the heavens manifest perpetual order. Therefore, on the contrary, an omniscient creator is needed to account for the perfect order of the universe, and the chain of natural causes must extend upward to nothing else but this creator. Defiantly, Girolamo further posited, or is God the author of contrary beliefs at the same time? Does he enjoy things sometimes in one way, sometimes in another, like a capricious man? Moreover, will he care very much about how he is worshipped, like the gods of the Gentiles? On the contrary, all these rituals were the inventions of exceedingly greedy priests. In effect, Girolamo's position was that God did not introduce errors into this world and was not the source of human plight, but rather these were the product of an occult force of the stars that caused mankind to act illogically and against its own nature. As the author Reiger states, "Who has not marveled that so many men voluntarily desert their children and wives, their lands and countries, and even subject themselves to torture, all for so many varied opinions on religion? These people support their suffering as if petrified. There is little doubt that Cardano views such religious behavior as extreme, specifically because it entails mortal danger for uncertain gain. It also does not occur in isolated incidents, but tends to manifest in clusters, which suggests a natural cause overriding the inclination towards self-preservation found in all living things." This opinion appears to have been shared by the Apostle Paul, who wrote in Ephesians 6:12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Miraculously, Girolamo's arguments ultimately prevailed, and his life was spared. However, all of his writings, save those explicitly medical, were placed in the Index of Forbidden Books by the Catholic Church. Yet, for reasons unknown, he was mysteriously granted a lifetime pension by Pope Gregory XIII. Girolamo then accepted a medical position at the Royal College of Physicians, where he practiced until his death in 1576. Ironically, these circumstances are eerily reminiscent of those discussed in Brothers of the Serpent, episode 213, albeit with a different outcome, surrounding the fate of the Maid of Orleans, better known as Joan of Arc, whose actions served as an example of Girolamo's assertion. In that vein, author Jonathan Reiger of Ghent University states, "One of Cardano's signature methodological approaches as a natural philosopher was to look for commonality in otherwise disparate experiences, with an eye towards cycles and exceptions, i.e., pattern recognition. From this perspective, here again, Girolamo exhibits an uncanny ability to objectively analyze the data and presents his readers with the following profound observation. Yet such unnatural occurrences have this effect. that while they are in the very act of happening or shortly before they come to pass, they make a great impression on a man, engaging his whole attention. When, however, the first heat of their influence has grown cool and the effect is diluted, unless you have made sure of their reality by nailing them, as it were, upon your consciousness, you almost doubt whether you have actually seen or heard anything. And this, I believe, happens for reasons even deeper than the gulf between our own. For in the mind, which is neither paralyzed by fear nor unsettled by conflicting emotions, violent spiritual stimuli, accompanied by demonstrations of a miraculous nature, undermine the foundations of false notions rather than increase them.
Brilliant.
Yeah. This is, okay, yeah. So as with Jacques Vallée's absurd framework reset and Grant Cameron's theory of wow regarding the spectacle nature of the UFO phenomenon offered over half a millennium later, I believe there is much to be derived from Girolamo's insightful observation. So do you want to explain that a little bit? The theory, the absurd framework reset?
Yeah, these are concepts that we've touched on in the past. There's always that question, why do UFOs have lights on them, and why do they do these crazy things? Why do these odd manifestations appear as gnomes or fairies or anything? Why is it always something surreal, something out of the norm?
Yeah.
And he's pointing out that that is exactly why. It's so that you recognize that it's important. It's nailing it to your conscious, and it says, because if not, you will doubt that it actually happened.
Yeah.
It causes you, it's both making a point and making you question your reality.
Yeah.
This is Vallee.
Vallee said the absurdity is the point.
Right.
It's supposed to be absurd. Yeah.
Right. Vallee tells a story about like a man, he's walking down the street. He comes around a corner and bumps into somebody, and he's going like he's going to get upset about it. And the person, instead of acknowledging that they ran into each other, the guy says, "What time is it?" And it's like he's got to look at his watch and see what time it is. He goes, it took him completely. It changed his entire framework of where his mind was going. It was a reset.
Yeah.
So and that, Grant Cameron calls it the theory of wow. Why do UFOs do these spectacular things and these wild manifestations? And it's to make a point.
But and
to nail them to your consciousness.
To continue the Vallee example, the guy bumps into him, and the dude is, the guy who got bumped into is about to get upset, and then the guy demands, like, "What time is it?"
Time to get out of my way.
Yeah.
He clearly wasn't from New York.
Time to watch where you're going. But the story goes that the guy looks at his watch and tells him the exact time, and then the person claims it's not that time and tells him it's something completely different, which also throws him again.
Makes him doubt. Right.
Yeah.
Like, did that really happen? Why?
Yeah.
That it didn't make any sense. It just threw him off. And then,
and he doesn't forget it, right? It's like then it sticks in your memory. Like, the dude bumped into me. He asked what time it was. I told him, and then he was like, "No, you're wrong. It's 3 o'clock." When it was like 5,
Mm-hmm.
That's weird.
And Girolamo was making effectively the exact same observation 500 years before.
Yeah. Yeah, it undermines the foundations of false notions rather than increasing them. These the demonstrations of a miraculous nature. The point of the absurdity is to make it so that you not only you remember it, but it becomes burned into your memory how weird it was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Like wearing long dark robes in July in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Had that guy been just dressed like a normal person, it may not have even remembered it ever happened.
Yeah. I saw somebody. Well, I better not say anything. Okay. Okay. If the preceding accounts were not enough to convince the listener of the significance of this individual, allow me to add the following to the calculus. In 1552, Years before his tumultuous trial, Girolamo traveled to London, where he stayed in the home of his friend John Cheek, a member of Parliament and one-time Secretary of State. Cheek introduced him to a former student of his with a keen interest in Girolamo's work. The 25-year-old student, 26 years Cardano's junior, was Dr. John Dee. During their time together, Girolamo and Dee conferred on such matters as magic, astrology, and mathematics. Girolamo avowed to Dee of possessing supernormal powers, which enabled him to project his soul out of his body, and encouraged Dee to pursue further study of occult practices. It is documented that Dee owned several copies of Girolamo's works, and one of his treatises titled Libelle Kinque. I don't know how to say that one.
Holy crap.
What? What?
I had not noticed this until I put it on the screen. This is the book. That is John Dee's writing.
Oh, that's his annotated.
You see the first line there? Version 10? What does it say next to it?
Marty.
It says Marty. Wow.
It does say Marty on there.
That happened live, folks. That was not planned.
Version 10, Marty.
I did not notice that. Holy crap. See what I mean?
What? What is
That's
happening?
Freaky. That's freaky.
Yep, that's pretty weird.
That's really freaking weird.
Does it say version 11 Marty down there as well? What is that? Is that another Marty?
This looks like that whole thing on the left. It's kind of like he's also trying to categorize his episodes.
Yeah,
Okay,
he
version
is.
10 Marty,
What
or
does it say
17
down
and
there?
2/5.
We'll get to that later.
Yes.
It's at the bottom.
Yeah,
It's we'll get to that later in Latin.
yeah, that's right. We need to learn that in Latin. Okay. John Dee. Okay. Where are we at here? Yeah, okay. It is documented that Dee. Okay, this is what I was reading. Like, he owned a title of his book, A Compendium on Astrology and the Movements of the Planets, which resides today in a collection of the Royal College of Physicians, replete with Dee's handwritten annotations in the margins, making it quite evident that Girolamo Cardano served as a tremendous inspiration for Dee's work and future spirit communications. It may be argued that this act of providence set in motion events whose reverberations are still felt today. In light of his connection to Dee, rather astounding parallels may be drawn between Girolamo and the main character of Prospero in Shakespeare's story The Tempest. Interestingly, Prospero, sorry. Interestingly, in his autobiography, Girolamo looks back upon his life and describes it in these words: "Even as galleys, tempest-tossed, are driven now from the depths to the crest of the surge, now plunged from on high into the yawning gulf, so it has gone with me throughout my career." A curious coincidental choice of words indeed. But if this were not enough to suggest Girolamo's apparent influence on Shakespeare, it should be noted that in the second act of Hamlet, the central character is holding Girolamo's De Subtitulate Rerum in his hand when Polonius asks him what he is reading, to which he answers, "Words, words, words." We could very easily have written an entire episode or more on this great man, which apparently we have done. Yeah. Just about. But what higher recognition could one receive than that offered by Wolfgang, what's this? How do you say this? Goethe. In his own right, considered to be one of the greatest poets, playwrights, scientists, and philosophers of all time. Goethe was responsible for the masterpiece Faust, whose protagonist shares striking similarities with that of Shakespeare's Prospero, including the aid of a spirit named Ariel. In regard to Girolamo Cardano, Goethe stated, "It is not the doctor in a long robe who instructs us from the height of the pulpit, it is the human being," adding that Girolamo was one of those men in whom posterity will never be finished, with whom posterity will never be finished. As we reach the end of this segment, allow me to briefly return to the beginning and explain why I chose to include Girolamo in my book, Monster Truck Technology. So this is Marty speaking. It's weird, Marty, when you do it first person, I have to say. When you know I'm going to read it.
I try to put we as much as possible. Sometimes I'm on a flow and I forget.
Yeah. It's your habit. This was done in recognition of his equally impressive capacity as an inventor. As it were, he was responsible for numerous inventions such as the combination lock, and of greater relevance to my book, the invention of the Cardano joint, the now pervasive technology more commonly known as the universal joint. You guys want to explain what this is? So people aren't just like, yeah,
like
man.
On a drive shaft.
They're for everyone, man, this joint.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it allows a shaft to spin around corners.
Vehicle.
Okay.
That's what a universal joint does.
Okay.
You can spin it around one corner, and around the other corner, it's spinning exactly the same.
Drive shafts on cars.
Yeah, they can come down and bend and go back. Yeah.
Right. It allows power transfer at.
You can change the angle.
You can change the axis of
okay.
direction of the
Exactly.
of the spinning shaft.
Okay, but arguably of greater historical significance, as the Advisory Group for Aerospace Research and Development for NATO stated, we are indebted to Girolamo Cardano, the Italian mathematician who invented the cardanic suspension, a form of support in which an instrument is hung on gimbals so as to allow free movement in all directions. This, in combination with his development of associated mathematical formula, were essential to the development of the modern gyroscope. This invention would serve as an indispensable technology for mankind's achievement of controlled rocket flight and space travel. In recognition of this monumental contribution, NASA named a crater on the moon Cardanus in his honor.
On the moon.
I'm sorry, a crater on the moon. What did I say?
On the move.
Oh, I named a crater on the moon, Cardanus in his honor. So to conclude this segment, I leave you with this final quote from Girolamo's Book of My Life. This alone I ask you, O reader, that when you peruse the account of these marvels, that you do not set up for yourself as a standard human intellectual pride, but rather the great size and vastness of earth and sky, and comparing with that infinity these slender shadows in which miserably and anxiously we are enveloped, you will easily know that I have related nothing which is beyond belief. Yeah, he's basically saying keep in mind the size of the universe, and you'll know that all these things are possible.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah. In the previous segment, it was suggested that the incorporeal intelligences involved appeared to exhibit non-localized knowledge and the ability to foretell future events. However, such abilities have also been documented as early as the 11th century BCE as being possessed by some in the physical realm, most notably the frenzied women or prophetesses known as the Sibyls. In 430 BCE, Herodotus wrote the Histories of the World, in which he tells the story of Croesus, king of Lydia, which was located in what is today modern Turkey. After mourning the loss of his son in approximately 550 BCE, Croesus chose to seek the advice of the Sibyls or oracles to learn if he would be successful in undertaking a military campaign against the Persians. To do so, he first sent envoys to various Greek and Libyan oracles to test their divinative abilities. The envoys were instructed to record the exact date and time of their departure from the capital of Sardis, and on the 100th day of their journey, they were to query the oracles regarding the current activities of his son. They were to write... Aliatus. They were to write down the responses of the oracles and report these back to him. When one of the envoys arrived before Pythia, or the Pythoness, the high priestess or sibyl of the temple of the Hyperborean god Apollo at Delphi. Hyperborean?
Yeah.
Woo! Hyperborean god Apollo at Delphi, and made his inquiry, the oracle responded with the following hexameter verses. I know the number of the grains of sand and the extent of the sea, and understand the mute and hear the voiceless. The smell has come to my senses of a strong-shelled tortoise, boiling in a cauldron together with a lamb's flesh, under which is bronze and over which is bronze. When the envoy returned to Sardis and handed the written response to Croesus, Herodotus wrote, "He acknowledged it with worship and welcome, for he had thought up something which no conjecture could discover, and carried it out on the appointed day. Namely, he had cut up a tortoise and a lamb, and then boiled them in a cauldron of bronze covered with a lid of the same." Herodotus adds that because of this, Croesus offered up 3,000 beasts from all the kinds fit for sacrifice, and on a great pyre burnt couches covered with gold and silver, golden goblets and purple cloaks and tunics. By these means he hoped the better to win the aid of the god, to whom he also commanded that every Lydian sacrifice what he could. When the sacrifice was over, he melted down a vast store of gold and made ingots of it. There were 117 of these. 4 of them were of refined gold, the rest were of gold with silver alloy, known as electrum. Interestingly, Croesus is thus widely credited as the first ruler to mint coins of monetary value. For millennia, such stories as these...
So we have money.
What?
We have money as a result of a tribute to a demon or an oracle.
Yeah. And of course, it's Pythia, right?
The Pythoness.
Yes, the snake lady.
Pythia.
Yeah.
Pythia.
Pythia?
Yeah, Pythia.
Let's see. For millennia, such stories such as these have led to much speculation and debate regarding the true origin of such knowledge. In this regard, among the many stories surrounding Pythia, the high priestess of Delphi, there is another that is of particular relevance to our discussion. That story began with a year-long drought in Boeotia? I don't know.
Boeotia, yep.
A region in central Greece. Seeing relief, a plea was made before Pythia, who advised of a god who was angry and must be located and duly worshipped to obtain a reprieve. Many unsuccessful attempts were made to locate the alleged god until one day a shepherd boy named Seon heard a swarm of bees. He traced the sound and observed the bees flying into a hole in the earth. It is written that he followed the bees down the hole expecting to find honey, but what he discovered instead was a demon. Homer, Cicero, Plutarch, Herodotus, Pausanias, and other historians wrote that the temple to Apollo at Delphi was built by his sons, Trophonius and Agamedes, who were talented architects credited with the construction of many such temples and palaces. Upon completion of the temple dedicated to their father, they requested that he reward them for their dedication. Apollo responded by informing them that they would receive their due reward in 7 days. During a previous construction of the treasury of Hyrieus for the king of... Is that right? Hyrieus for the king of Hyria. The brothers designed a secret entrance that allowed them to enter undetected to continually steal treasure. Eventually, the king became suspicious and had traps laid to apprehend any would-be thieves. 7 days after completion of the Temple of Apollo, while waiting their reward, the brothers entered the treasury of Hyrieus to refill their coffers when suddenly Agamedes became ensnared in a trap. Unable to free him and fearful of being implicated, Trophonius cut off Agamedes' head so that he could not be identified. At that moment, the ground opened up and swallowed Trophonius whole, as he was condemned to reside in the underworld. Such was the reward that they were promised by their father Apollo. Trophonius then became a demon and oracle with whom worthy individuals consulted in the depths of what came to be known as the Cave of Trophonius, otherwise referred to as the Cave of Nightmares. Trophonius' association with bees is noteworthy as it is reminiscent of a similar association regarding his father Apollo's sister Artemis, known as the queen bee, as well as several references made in this series to the sound of buzzing bees, sometimes in association with anomalous physiological effects made in this series. In the book Descriptions of Greece, written in the 2nd century CE by the geographer and historian Pausanias, the author provides a first-hand witness account of his experience visiting the Cave of Nightmares and describes the procedure as follows. When a man has resolved to go down to the Oracle of Trophonius, he first of all lodges for a stated number of days in a certain building which is sacred to the good demon and good fortune. During his sojourn there, he observes rules of purity and in particular refrains from warm baths. His bath is the river Hersina, and he collects plenty of flesh from sacrifices. The sacrifices, rams in particular being most favorable, were then offered to determine if the individual would be received by Trophonius. If worthy, the individual was then ready to begin their descent. Pausanias wrote, "The way in which he goes down is this. First of all, in the course of the night, 2 local boys about 13 years old lead him to the river Hersina, and there anoint him with oil and wash him. These boys are called Herme. It is they who,
That's the male. That's the male term for harem. And they're 13-year-old boys.
Yeah, weird. It is they who wash him and perform all needful offices for him. Next, he is led by the priests, not at once to the oracle, but to certain springs of water, which are very near each other. Here he must drink what is called the water of forgetfulness, or lethe, or leth? Lethe, in order that he may forget everything he has hitherto thought of. After that, he drinks another water, to wit, the water of memory, whereby he remembers what he sees down below. Pausanias then describes how the individual is taken to a strange temple on a mountain guarded by 2 serpents built over the site of the cave, which is said to have been constructed by the mythological master architect and craftsman Daedalus, the father of Incrus. Before entering, the individual must worship and pray before an image that is only revealed to those who visit Trophonius. Pausanias next provides readers with the following details about the temple and the cave entrance. The cave is surrounded in a circle by a basement of white marble, the circumference of which is about that of a threshing floor of the smallest size, or approximately 50 feet, and the height less than 2 ells, approximately 3 feet. On the basement are set bronze spikes connected by cross rails, which are also of bronze, and there are gates in the railing. Inside the enclosure is a chasm in the earth, not a natural chasm, but built in the exactest of style of masonry. Its breadth across may be guessed at 4 ells, or approximately 6 feet, while its depth cannot be estimated at more than 8, approximately 12 feet. There is no passage leading down to the bottom, but when a man goes to Trophonius, they bring him a narrow and light ladder. When he has descended, he sees a hole between the ground and the masonry. The breadth of the hole appears to be 2 spans, or 18 inches, and its height 1, or 9 inches. At that point, Pausanias begins to describe the peculiar procedure required to enter the cave, which leaves us with the distinct impression that this is something more mysterious than a simple hole in the ground. He states, "So he lays himself on his back on the ground, and he thrusts his feet first into the hole and follows himself, endeavoring to get his knees through the hole. When they are through, the rest of his body is immediately dragged after them and shoots in, just as a man might be caught and dragged down by a swirl of a mighty and rapid river." Once in the presence of Trophonius, Pausanias wrote, "The future is not revealed to all in the same way, but to one it is given to see and another to hear, and they return through the same aperture feet foremost."
That is strange.
Yeah, it is weird.
Oh, it gets weirder.
Well, we do need to take a break here. It's break time. I need to stretch. I need a beer. But yeah, this is...
A beer?
I need a beer.
Marty? Got any beers?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I got tequila and all sorts of stuff.
All right. Margarita time.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Marty.
That water.
Cheers, buddy.
We're back. Fastest 2 hours in podcasting, segment 4 already. Continuing on with the strange cave aperture thing, guy getting sucked in.
The Trophonius oracle.
Contraption, oracle.
Yeah. So despite the fear induced in those who visited, Pausanias recalls the only one account of actual bodily harm, stating, "They say that none of those who went down died, except one of Demetrius's bodyguards, who, they say, observed none of the rules of the sanctuary and went down, not to consult the god, but in the hope of carrying off gold and silver from the shrine. It is said that his dead body appeared at another place and was not cast out at the sacred opening. This, however, should not diminish the traumatic effects suffered by those brave and inquisitive enough to visit the cave, which, as Pausanias wrote, seemed to persist for some time afterward. He wrote, "When a man has come up from Trophonius, the priests take him in hand again and set him on what is called the chair of memory, which stands not far from the shrine. And being seated there, he is questioned by them as to all he saw and heard. On being informed, they hand him over to his friends, who carry him, still overpowered with fear and quite unconscious of himself and his surroundings, to the building where he lodged before, in the house of good fortune and the good demon. Afterward, however, he will have all his wits as before, and the power of laughter will come back to him." I think this idea of these caves is interesting, because how many other caves could be like this? Because there's plenty of old stories of this person went off into the desert, into a cave, had visions, and comes out a different person, or enlightened, or a changed man, or with prophecies. So is this indicative of some natural phenomena that we don't understand, or are there actual, dimensional doorways in some caves, and why would that be? Or is it, just like they're saying, there is a demon that's living in here?
Yeah, I think for listeners, if they, on their second go around, they pay particular attention to the description of the cave.
Yeah. Yeah, the cave has...
The fact that it's 50 feet in diameter and 3 feet tall with a dome. And
yeah.
Even you notice in the picture, there are some peculiarities to this cave.
Yeah.
And as we get further in, the descriptions of what's seen inside get even stranger yet. Certainly don't sound like what you would expect to see in a cave. Pausanias
emphasized that these were not mere tales passed down through generations, instead stating, "I write not from mere hearsay. I have myself consulted Trophonius, and have seen others who have done so. All who have gone down to Trophonius are obliged to set up a tablet containing a record of all they heard or saw." Interestingly, in De Subtilitate, I don't know how to say this, Subtilitate Rerum, Girolamo Cardano also discussed Pausanias' account, adding, "I am not reporting what I have heard, but I once saw it, and myself consulted the Oracle of Trophonius. However great the priestly tricks you may invent, it cannot be attributed to a trick that he was snatched in as through by an eddy and thrown out by the feet. If this was due to the nature of the place, it must surely be the case that he was hearing and not contrived by a trick, since in a place of such violence no one could stand to contrive an artifice." In the 2nd century CE, Flavius Philostratus wrote that, how do you say this guy's name? Apollonius of Tyana.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Apollonius of Tyana was initially denied entry to the cave of Trophonius by its priests, who believed that he was a magician who intended to challenge the oracle. Nevertheless, Apollonius surreptitiously accessed the cave with the aid of his followers by lifting 4 of the obelisks blocking its entrance. Once he descended into the cave, but in virtually identical fashion to that described by Pausanias, he was received by Trophonius, who looked favorably upon him, as it was written that the latter appeared to his priests in their dreams to rebuke them for Apollonius's treatment, and informed them that he would reemerge in marvelous fashion as no man before, which he did 7 days later, longer than anyone had ever been in Trophonius's presence, and brought back with him a volume containing the tenets of Pythagoras, which he received in response to his question regarding what he believed to be the most complete and purest philosophy. This encounter appeared to have had lasting effects on Apollonius, who at Ephesus was so influenced by his demonic communication to precognitively announce the assassination of Roman Emperor Domitian.
Yep.
So what revelations might await any who dare venture into Trophonius's Cave of Nightmares? In De Genio Socrates, 1995 CE, Plutarch provided us with a lengthy and thought-provoking account by Simmias of Thebes, a disciple of Socrates. He wrote, Timarchus, in his desire to learn the nature of Socrates' sign, or daemon, acting like the high-spirited young initiate in philosophy he was, descended into the cave of Trophonius, first performing the rites that are customary at the oracle. He remained underground for 2 nights and a day, and most people had already given up hope, and his family were lamenting him for dead when he came up in the morning with a radiant countenance. He did obeisance to the god, and as soon as he had escaped the crowd, began to tell us of many wonders seen and heard. He said that on descending into the oracular cave, his first experience was of profound darkness. Next, after a prayer, he lay a long time not clearly aware whether he was awake or dreaming. It did seem to him, however, that at the same moment he heard a crash and was struck on the head, and that the sutures parted and released his soul. As it withdrew and mingled joyfully with air that was translucent and pure, it felt in the first place that now, after long being cramped, it had again found relief and was growing larger than before, spreading out like a sail, and next that it faintly caught the whir of something revolving overhead with a pleasant sound. He's saying his soul did this. You know, if you...
something revolving overhead.
Yeah, the revolving overhead, but before that, he says that something strikes him on his head. The sutures of his skull part.
Remember from 2 episodes ago, the story of Harry Stump and his description with the mushrooms and the sensation that he got.
Yeah.
It was the same thing, the sutures on his... in fact, that was one of the rites that the Egyptian that came through, that, you know, he was channeling this Egyptian spirit, and it told him to rub this, they didn't call it a mushroom. I don't remember what the term was, but that it was rubbed on the sutures of the skull.
But I'm saying specifically this description that once his soul was set free of his skull, it felt like
astral travel.
Yeah, it felt in the first place that now, after long being cramped, it had found relief and was growing larger, spreading out. This is something that you hear from people who have near-death experiences.
Exactly.
They die, and then suddenly they come out of their body, and they're like, oh, it's like they stretch out, and they're like, oh, I don't feel cramped anymore. And then, of course, when...
Oh, the genie.
Yeah, like they come out of the bottle. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then when they... Of course, these people are all... Since it's a near-death, their body wakes back up. So then they describe coming back into their body, that they're being squeezed into this tiny space again.
Wow, I just realized, I'd never actually compared like the genie in the bottle idea to the soul being just trapped inside a human body.
Yeah, are we the bottles?
We are the freaking bottles of the demon that somebody's been putting in the bottle to keep us from...
Yes, yeah. Our bodies are the bottles. And we are the demons. Oh. Yeah, that's like the skeleton thing. I don't know why this reminded me of that. It's like skeletons are taking over the world. In fact, there's one inside you right now. Right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So when he lifted his eyes, the earth was nowhere to be seen. But he saw islands or platforms illuminated by one another with soft fire, taking on now one color and now another, like a dye, as the light kept varying with their mutations. They appeared countless in number and huge in size, though not all equal, yet all alike round, and he fancied that their circular movement made a musical whirling in the ether. For the gentleness of the sound resulting from the harmony of all the separate sounds, corresponded to the evenness of their motion. In their midst lay spread a sea or lake, through whose blue transparency the colors passed in their migrations. And of the islands, or platforms, a few sailed out in a channel and crossed the current, while many others were carried along with it, the sea itself drifting around, as it were, smoothly and evenly in a circle. As they crested the surge, the islands came back, without, however, returning to their point of departure or completing a circle, but with each new circuit they advanced slightly beyond the old, describing a single spiral in their revolution. The sea containing these was inclined at an angle of somewhat less than 8 parts of the whole toward the midmost and largest portion of the surrounding envelope, as he made out, and it had 2 openings receiving rivers of fire emptying into it across from one another, so that it was forced far back, boiling, and its blue color was turned to white. All this he viewed with the enjoyment of the spectacle.
You don't see that, dude. You don't see my screen share.
I can.
Yeah, I can see it if I look over there, yeah. So are you implying this is a quasar?
He's describing a spiral with jets coming out.
Yeah.
Top and bottom.
That's cool.
But looking down, he saw a great abyss, round, as though a sphere had been cut away. Most terrible and deep it was, and filled with a mass of darkness that did not remain at rest, but was agitated and often welled up. For it could be heard innumerable roars and groans of animals, the wailing of innumerable babes, the mingled lamentations of men and women, and noise and uproar of every kind coming faintly from far down in the depths, all of which startled him not a little. After some time, and amid his wonderment, Timarchus suddenly heard the voice of Trophonius address him. He asked, "Timarchus, what would you have me explain?" "Everything," he answered. "For what is here that is not marvelous?" "Nay," the voice replied. "In the higher regions we others have but little part, as they belong to gods. But you may, if you wish, inquire into the portion of Persephone, administered by ourselves. It is one of the 4, and marked off by the course of the Styx. Note that Persephone is the daughter of Zeus, who became the queen of the underworld after she was abducted by its king, Hades." "What is the Styx?" Timarchus asked. "It is the path to Hades," came the answer. "It passes across from you here, cleaving the light with its vertex. It extends upwards, as you see, from Hades below, and where in its revolution it also touches the world of light, it bounds the last region of all." Trophonius then went on to provide an explanation of each of the 4 aforementioned realms or aspects of physical reality. He stated, 4 principles there are of all things. The first is of life, the second of motion, the third of birth, and the last of decay. The first is linked to the second by unity at the invisible, the second to the third by mind at the sun, and the third to the fourth by nature at the moon. The turning point of birth is at the moon, for while the rest of the islands or platforms belong to the gods, the moon belongs to terrestrial demons and avoids the Styx by passing slightly above it. It is caught, however, once in 170 secondary measures. Wow.
Pretty amazing, isn't that?
The moon belongs to terrestrial demons.
Yes. He said
It's a spaceship.
he didn't know anything about or he could not comment on the other celestial bodies that
Yeah, the
Timarchus
other
was seeing.
platforms.
He goes, those are, he said, those belong to the gods.
Yeah.
Ask me about the portion of Persephone,
Yeah,
which is the underworld.
right.
So what is that suggesting?
That the Earth is part of the underworld? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's administered by the demons.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the river
Sounds right.
The river Styx passes slightly above the moon, is what he's saying there.
Yep.
But it is caught once in 177 secondary measures. So every once in a while, it drifts into the Styx.
The moon?
Yeah. As the Styx draws near, the souls cry out in terror.
Oh, is that when there's a lunar, like a lunar eclipse? Maybe?
I was just thinking that. Is that an eclipse?
That's
because
because it goes into the Styx and the darkness comes over it.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a phenomenon. That's the shadow cast by Earth onto the moon.
So the underworld is casting its shadow onto the realm of the terrestrial demons, and it turns red.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Demon moon.
Yeah. Wolf demon moon. As the Styx draws near, the souls cry out in terror, for many slip off and are carried away by Hades. Others, whose cessation of birth falls out at the proper moment, swim up from below and are rescued by the moon, the foul and unclean excepted. These, the moon, with lightning and a terrible roar, forbids to approach, and bewailing their lot, they fall away and are borne downward again to another birth, as you see. So what is he saying here? That souls are coming up from the earth, and some of them are caught by the moon, and they get sent back down to live again. This is I've heard some of this before somewhere a long time ago about what did I hear this from? That there's this cyclical thing and it's a trap, and the moon is part of the machine that keeps us in the trap.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. This will be expanded upon as we get further into this.
Okay.
It's lunacy.
Yeah, this is why, like, how is it that the full moon can make people crazy?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Because all of us, including all the animals, we know that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Timarchus did not understand any of this, instead responding, "But I see nothing, only many stars trembling about the abyss, others sinking into it, and others again shooting up from below." Trophonius replied, "You see the daemons themselves." He then elaborated, "Every soul partakes of understanding. None is irrational or unintelligent. The part that is plunged into the body is called the soul, but the uncorrupted part is called the mind. And people think that it is within them, as likewise they imagine the image reflected is in the mirror. But the more intelligent, who know it to be external, call it a daemon." He then explained to Timarchus what he was actually observing. He stated, "Thus, in the stars that are apparently extinguished, you must understand that you see the souls that sink entirely into the body. In the stars that are lighted again, as it were, and reappear from below, you must understand that you see the souls that float back from the body after death, shaking off a sort of dimness and darkness as one might shake off mud. While the stars that move about on high are the daemons of men said to possess understanding. These souls indeed are brought to their duty and made firm in it late and gradually, but from those other souls, which from their very beginning in birth are docile to the reign and obedient to their daemon, comes the race of diviners and of men inspired." Trophonius then referred to an example of one such inspired man. He said, "Among such souls, you have doubtless heard of Hermodorus of Clazomene."
Of course. Everyone has heard of this
Yes, everyone's heard of Hermodorus of Clazomene. And how night and day his soul used to leave his body entirely and travel far and wide, returning after he had met with and witnessed many things said and done in remote places, until his wife betrayed him and his enemies found his body at home untenanted by his soul, and they burnt it.
That's like Tesla right there.
What do you mean?
Not the burning part, but like every night. Like
he would go on these astral journeys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The story as thus told is indeed not true. His soul did not leave his body, but gave its daemon free play by always yielding to it and slackening the tie, permitting it to move about and roam at will, so that the daemon could see and hear much that passed in the world outside and return with the report. The men who destroyed his body as he slept are still atoning for the deed in Tartarus, the lowest part of the underworld. Note that in this statement, Trophonius claims that the act of astral travel or bilocation was not performed by the soul of the individual, but rather was informed by its daemon. With that said...
Informed by the mind.
By the mind.
What he's saying.
Right.
Yeah.
The higher self or the shadow.
Yeah.
I got to figure out how to work on that rope. Just slacken that rope a little bit.
Oh yeah, you got it pulled too tight.
Yeah,
right now.
it's like yeah. I can't astral travel. Basically, I can't. I get like up to the edge of the skull, and then it's like.
You need to rub the mushroom on the sutures.
I was thinking that is it tray panning? Tray panning?
Yeah, you open the hole in the skull so that
That's a weird
trepanation. Yeah.
That is strange.
Talk about having an open mind.
I'd rather just work on the rope thing.
Yeah.
Are you sure? We can do it for science, bro. I can help you make a little hole in there.
I have to wear a helmet at work all the time.
Yeah.
Nah.
It doesn't have to be a big hole.
That's for priests.
Okay. Okay. With that said, allow me to take a brief tangent to point out that Timarchus's bizarre description is very reminiscent of that offered by Paul Garrett, discussed in Brothers of the Serpent, episode 214. As listeners may recall, Garrett was involved in a near-fatal automobile accident in California on January 31st, 1970, and later recounted details of his horrific near-death experience, which came to the attention of the U.S. military psychologists allegedly studying the effects of PTSD in association with the University of South Carolina, but was in reality investigated at the behest of the organization pseudonymously known as the Collins Elite. Coincidentally, the University of South Carolina is also where the CIA was funding the study of demonology and witchcraft during that period under the program MK Often.
My God.
While in that liminal state, Garrett claimed to have witnessed an endless blue landscape containing a mass from which was heard the screaming of an untold number of human beings. He described seeing hundreds of flying saucer-like objects darting about around the mass, which he described as appearing like metallic worker bees. He then observed small balls of light that seemed to ascend from the mass of bodies that were being collected by the saucers. Then a large black hole materialized and the mass of people rose to their feet and entered into it. Garrett further added that he believed he had seen things that were not meant for us to see because whatever was responsible for that horrific scene had followed him back to this physical realm.
Oof. Serious hitchhiker right there.
Yeah. But I digress. So sensing a continued lack of understanding on the part of Timarchus, Trophonius added, "Of these matters you will have better knowledge, young man, in the 3rd month from now. For the present, depart." Yeah, get out. At that instant, Timarchus turned in an attempt to catch a glimpse of the speaker. However, as Plutarch wrote, but once more he felt a sharp pain in his head, as though it had been violently compressed, and he lost all recognition and awareness of what was going on about him. But he presently recovered and saw that he was lying in the crypt of Trophonius near the entrance, at the very spot where he had first laid himself down. Plutarch then further adds that Timarchus returned to Athens, where he died 3 months later, just as Trophonius had prophesied. When informed of this, Socrates lamented not having the opportunity to question Timarchus in person before his passing. Plutarch concludes the story by stating, "My statement is now complete. I say, therefore, that the story of Timarchus is sacred and not to be profaned and should be dedicated to the god." In a similar regard, Girolamo Cardano also made several references to encounters with subterranean demons known as telkines, which were considered to be semi-divine blacksmiths or magicians who dwelled in the underworld and possessed the ability to manifest wondrous spectacles. He wrote, "I have spoken about these events and the strange voices of plague and the likenesses of chariots that are seen and are, so to speak, suddenly overturned with banging and crashing. For the moment, it is enough to warn. Experience does the convincing, but it is no proof. And this is the type of debate, so that for the supporters there will invariably be flight and conflict with the opposition, while for the deniers there is experience, so that these events would not seem to be turning up enough to reinforce the view of enthusiasts about demons in connection with telkeens.
Notice that crashing, overturning of chariots, and people see it, but the ones that didn't see it don't believe it.
Yeah.
And there's debates whether they're real or not.
It sounds
Girolamo
very
Cardano
similar.
had great observations.
Mm-hmm. Why is he connecting them with telkeens specifically?
He said there's a specific type of demon that dwells in the underworld or underground.
Okay.
Subterranean demons.
I just have to say, I like this idea of the telkeen being like, if you think about, I mean, this is more, this not UFO related, but you dig down and there's like these insane metals like down in there. And then the deeper you go, a lot of times like the more crazy these metals. So it's like there's a demon down there like forging these metals in that. But it's natural. I'm just saying, like, it's a cool personification of sort of the natural processes that create or...
All of these things are natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the telkins.
Yeah. I mean a personification or like...
nature.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there's gold veins. And so the idea, it's like, there's a god over there just like hammering that gold into that vein. That's why it's there.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. It's just cool.
Oh, good.
Not necessarily UFO related, but
Everything's UFO related. Just haven't made the connection.
Well, if it's all related, then nothing is related. You know how this goes. Yeah. Okay. Likewise referred to as maligners and sorcerers by Strabo, telkeens were believed to be malevolent demons who were responsible for the art of metallurgy. They were the blacksmiths of the gods and are credited with forging Poseidon's trident, Kronos' sickle, and could manipulate matter to create many wondrous objects. For this reason, and out of concern for their malevolent use of power, they were ultimately struck down by Zeus, who sent them to the bottom of the sea, or the underworld. Yet, interestingly, they were also considered by some cultures to be cultivators of the soil and ministers of the gods, who were curiously depicted as men with fins in place of their hands and feet. Yeah, so now we're looking at Oannes, who had been... So the Oannes was a telkeen who had been banished to the sea, to the bottom of the sea.
Yep, Kalu, Oannes.
Yeah, and so he's coming out of the water and he's like, listen,
Dogon, or...
let me tell you about how to make a sword.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dagon.
Dagon. Oh, God. We're getting Lovecraftian over here. Okay. In The Anatomy of Melancholy, Burton wrote, terrestrial devils are those lairs, the genii, the fauns and satyrs, wood nymphs, foliates, fairies, Robin Goodfellows, truly, etc., which, as they are most conversant with men, so they do them most harm. Some think it was they alone that kept the heathen people in awe of old, and had so many idols and temples erected to them. Of this range was Dagon amongst the Philistines, Baal amongst the Babylonians, Astartea amongst the Sidonians, Baal amongst the Samaritans, Isis and Osiris amongst the Egyptians, etc. Dithmarus Bleskenius, in his description of Iceland, reports for a certainty that almost in every family they have yet some such familiar spirits. And Foelix Malleolus, in his book De Crude Daemon, affirms as much, that these trolli or telkeens are very common in Norway, and seen to do drudgery work, to draw water, saith Wierus, dress meat, or any such thing. Another sort of these there are, which frequent forlorn houses which the Italians call foliates. The most part innoxious, Cardano holds. They will make strange noises in the night, howl sometimes pitifully, and then laugh again, cause great flame and sudden lights, fling stones, rattle chains, shave men, open doors and shut them, fling down platters, stools, chests, and sometimes appear in the likenesses of hares, crows, black dogs, etc. Wow, that just described pretty much every paranormal activity you could think of.
Pretty much Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, and all the haunted houses and yeah, poltergeists and everything. So what are we to make of the Sibyls, and what might be the true nature of their divinatory powers? Considered divinely inspired ancient ones, the origins of the Sibyls are unknown, and records of their prophecies date as far back as the very beginnings of our recorded history, and spread throughout Egypt, Italy, Greece, Asia Minor, Persia, and Africa. In De Genio Socrates, Plutarch wrote, "Shown by the oracle delivered to his father when Socrates was yet a boy, it bade him let the child do whatever came into his mind, and not do violence to his impulses or divert them, but allow them free play, taking no further trouble about him than to pray to Zeus and the Muses, surely implying by this that he had a better guide of life in himself than 1,000 teachers and attendants." Laetius and Porphyry wrote that Pythagoras learned a great deal of his moral doctrine from Pythia at Delphi. Plato and Sophocles, Sophocles, that's it. Sophocles also wrote of the Sibyls' reputable wisdom, and members of the Roman Senate consulted with the Sibyls who advised them on matters related to the past and future of the empire. As such, surviving remnants of Sibylline writings indicate that they were well educated in political and philosophical matters and held a sophisticated worldview. Although pagan by definition, Sibylline prophecies were adopted by Jewish tradition, and their apocalyptic philosophy was fundamental to Gnosticism, which served as the basis for subsequent Christian religions. And many of their writings were assimilated into traditional religious concepts. For example, they wrote, "But when the threats of the Almighty God had been fulfilled, with which he had once threatened those who made a tower in the land of Assyria, they all spoke one language and resolved to ascend to a starry heaven. Quickly the immortal added to the winds a mighty force, and tempests from above threw down the huge tower, and among humankind he raised up confusion. Therefore mortals gave to that city the name of Babylon. But when the tower fell, and the tongues of men became discordant, all the earth was filled with mortals and divided among kings. To that end, they wrote of a war between the sons of Cronus and the Titans, who took wives of his daughters and chained him in the earth. Upon seeing this, God rained vengeance upon them, destroying the Titans and their hybrid offspring. Other Sibylline prophecies are said to have been adapted into the books of Daniel and Enoch, but more significantly, they also foretold of a coming Savior for all mankind. This particular philosophy may cause some to ponder. Save mankind from what exactly? Woo. Do we need to be saved, Marty?
I don't know. We don't know what's going on yet. Saved from what?
So I know we've pointed this out before.
Wait a minute. It can't be us. Because how could then we come down and have children with ourselves and create... I don't know if that would
monstrosities?
work. Yeah.
So it's not the future us's.
Yeah, I guess not.
Okay.
I mean, I guess that could create monstrosities, but that's biological. That doesn't count.
Yep. So, I probably point this out every episode, but it's like we're going through all these old texts, and it some of it's biblical, some of it's ancient Greeks and other things, and they're calling them demons and daemons and all these different names. But I think the point that's being made here is we just don't know what this is, right? And exactly. I think you're making the point throughout the text, look at all these different terms and names and things that they've called these things. And And then there's all this information that seems to be coming directly to people from these sources, but we don't know if we could trust them either. You know, you can't really take the stuff that they're saying as truth. Some of it might be. We just have there's no way of
sorting it or sifting it.
Yeah.
Notice that Fazio, remember, Girolamo Cardano noted that when his father Fazio bound the demon, it gave him truthful answers. But when he released it, it kept coming back, but it gave him false responses.
So
You just need to take all of it and just burn it. You can't separate the wheat from the chaff.
Unless you can bind one, supposedly,
Yeah.
and then you can get truths, right?
That's true.
So
Like
this is what Solomon's gift from God was the ability to bind all
them.
demons. Yeah. He knew all their
One
names.
ring to bind them.
Yes, exactly. He had the one ring. Yeah.
But he learned how to do that from the book that was actually given to him by one of the angels,
Yeah.
the Sefer Raziel that was passed down. So it was still knowledge coming from that realm.
Right. So he probably could only bind the ones below the guy who had given him the book. Yeah. The Sefer Raziel, yeah.
So if you get if
But how did Fazio bind the one he had? Because he had all this occult knowledge?
Yeah.
What occult knowledge?
He said that he surpassed everyone in his time.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that
But this is giving us a clue. Like,
right, this is passed down. In other words, Fazio passed this down to Girolamo, and it appears that Girolamo passed this on to John Dee.
to D.
And then as a result, we had Crowley and Parsons and
Yeah.
all,
It's
all
still
that.
happening.
It's all downstream, right? That's all downstream of Fazio. There's a direct connection between all these people.
So who gave it to Fazio? I mean, can you keep following this line backwards? Probably. You could trace it all the way back to Egypt. And
Possibly.
yeah.
Guess we'll have to wait and find out.
so it doesn't spread, the knowledge doesn't really spread. It just goes like from one to the next one to the next one.
Well, maybe there are
That's
different
pretty
avenues
damn-
or different technologies for accessing this information.
That's a pretty tightly held secret. What order
we've
are they
covered
in?
a little bit of it. I mean, we know from the previous episode that the government, the CIA in particular, was definitely searching for an ability to access this information through the use of hallucinogenics and mushrooms. And in other words, there have been many attempts to access some realm of information, whatever that is, Akashic records, or this information field that's out there. I mean, these are, keep in mind the names of the individuals that we're discussing in this episode. These are not just average people. Most of these are historically considered some of the most brilliant minds to have ever lived. So they firmly believed in this. It's
And according to some of this writing, their brilliant minds were also daemons.
Yeah,
Like
that's what I mean.
Like, so they had
the most,
Yeah, I mean, we
like the dumbest demons.
yeah,
That's what it
this
said.
is there's so
Most
much in
brilliant
this.
people. Sorry.
are
the-
still dumber
the-
than the dumbest demons. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and that was said in here, but there's so much gold in this. Like, there's so many great quotes in this whole episode, a lot that we haven't even heard yet. But one of the things that I thought was really important was the fact that was the statement on the that Trophonius told to Marcus. He said, "Every soul partakes of understanding. None is irrational or unintelligent. The part that is plunged into the body is called the soul, but the uncorrupted part is called the mind." and people think that it is within them, as likewise they imagine that the image reflected is in the mirror. But the more intelligent who know it to be external call it a diamond.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. So it's like the, morphic resonance or anything of that. Your thoughts are not in your head.
Yeah, that's non-local.
In your brain.
Yeah.
Right. It's non-local.
Yes, because
They're
there's this.
talking about this over 2,500 years ago. They were already talking about these concepts.
Yeah, because you have a. Yeah, that's right. Because you do have some, like, you have maybe an internal dialogue, but there's also this part that's listening to the dialogue, paying attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, a
It's like
psychologist is going to view this as like your higher self or the shadow or something, Jungian concept.
The id and the, yeah.
Right. So, and you start to wonder where do you separate these things? Are they can be external and still be you.
Yeah.
So where is the overlap? Is there truly this, what do they call superlunar force?
Yeah.
As in outside of the solar system.
Yeah. Past the sticks.
Past the moon.
Yeah.
Outside of the sticks, that's influence, celestial influence is what he called it. And it's interesting that even when, Girolamo Cardano, even when he was facing, the Inquisition, his arguments won. He used the logic. Like, does God change his mind from one moment to the next? And does he really care about how he's worshipped?
Yeah.
Or is this man?
Yeah.
And and he's not only spared, he's given a life pension.
Yeah, that part reminded me of like the Templar stuff.
Right.
They're like
what
giving
did he
this.
know?
Yeah, they're giving this. The Pope is like, hold on, like you have a special dispensation to do whatever you want. Just leave us alone, right? And that's the same thing where he's like, we're gonna lock up all your books, but
Right.
you can go back to doing medical stuff. We're gonna make sure you're comfortable for the rest of your life. Just be quiet. Just shut up about this stuff.
That's exactly what I took. It seemed to suggest that he possessed some form of knowledge that was dangerous, and they wanted it controlled. Like I guess maybe they felt like, well, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
So we can't execute him, but at the same time, we can't have him going out there.
Yeah,
and
you can't just be telling people
these
this
secrets,
stuff.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I love the way these things all seem to, fall together. They seem like disparate things, but then there are these aspects that bring everything together, and we're going to see that continue as we progress through this. That there are yet more components we haven't even brought into this mechanism yet. That appears to suggest that there's some, this term that I always use, Jiminy Cricket's real. It's the same underlying concept, that there's some other realm of intelligence. And I hesitate to necessarily attribute it to what we would consider intelligence. Like, intelligence may be more non-physical than we seem to think. In other words, we view intelligence as a collection of things, and we attribute intelligence to it, where it could be something more complex and more pervasive than we recognize. That there could be fields of intelligence, like morphic resonance or Akashic records.
Do you think?
And does it have ability to communicate? Like, is it a two-way thing? Like,
Yeah.
we don't just access it; it accesses us.
Yeah, that is like a morphic resonance. Like there's certain biological aspects that allow us to tune in to this particular resonance and pick up on it.
Like the feel,
There's a
all pervasive field. I like
Yeah.
that idea. That's cool.
Yeah.
And it has the ability to manifest if it's got all knowledge,
Yeah.
potentially billions of years of collective knowledge from all over. In other words, these things, this is where I had said in prior episodes that we have to resist the tendency to think in binary terms, that we think, oh, are they aliens or are they demons, or are they physical or are they non-physical? Like it can be all of the above.
You have
We're
thoroughly
talking about-
confused all of those by number 13-4A. I mean, anytime the subject of UFOs comes up, I'm just like,
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah. Well, we've been studying it intensely for years,
I know less.
and we know
No.
even less than we did when we started.
And that's only going to get compounded as we get further into this
Yeah.
episode, or into this. There's definitely some different takes on what's going on.
Do you think this is actually making some specific descriptions of space? Like you were, I mean, I was
Oh, yeah.
mostly
Do you
reading here,
notice
but you were,
Tremarcus's descriptions, like when I put
you're
the
bringing up space pictures.
nebulas and yeah, right. Notice that at first he's talking about platforms,
Yeah.
but then later he starts saying, "I see stars."
Yeah.
In other words, he is seeing space.
Yeah. Yeah. And he calls it,
2,500
he's like,
years
if you're
ago.
not looking at the platforms, there's this deep abyss. Well, yeah, that's
Right.
space.
And these platforms are circling about,
Yeah.
and some are not in the spiral, they're crossing it.
Yeah.
And they're different, they're of different colors. He's
Yeah.
describing things that were later. In other words, how did he know? Was these just good guess? Was these just good guesses at what, some of these celestial bodies look like and stuff? I mean, this was over 2,500 years ago. And the similarity to Paul Garrett's experience, I thought, was striking.
Well, I guess what I was, that's true. But what I was specifically asking there is, he's like, well, the river Styx just is outside the passage of the moon. Well, what would this be?
Good question. Don't know. But as we
Like
get more
Earth's
information,
magnetic
maybe-
field? Could that would be what it is? I mean, you could see it as or like the solar flux could be a river. It's flowing from the sun all the time. And it passes around, there's an envelope around the earth that the moon is sort of in, right?
I'd pull up a quote because I'll screw it up if I try to get from memory.
I think it's the barbed wire fence.
The far wire.
They're
the
like,
firmament. We can't.
don't go in there. That's ours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
Like the moon? Like leave this alone?
Well, the
Oh, you
river
mean there's
Styx.
just out past the moon is like,
Yeah. Well, no, that's open, but we're not allowed out there. And
Yeah.
no one's allowed in here.
okay. You're right. It's blocking it both ways.
Yeah. And then the warden occasionally comes down and does some stuff or whatever. And then
Yeah.
occasionally like some people sneak in
Yeah.
and
the
steal shit.
The demons of the moon are the wardens, sort of.
Yeah.
The terrestrial demons.
I'm trying to find.
You can't touch.
And they get trapped in the caves, bro.
You can't touch the water, the river Styx. You have
Yeah.
to have this special boat.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't touch it.
Cardano makes reference to
It's
the
an electric
sun.
fence.
Yeah, the electric universe thing. Yeah, you notice that the moon. He says that the moon sends lightning bolts.
Yeah. Are you trying to find a specific Cardano quote that's in this?
Yeah, I should just search.
Well,
it.
just paraphrase
Oh,
it.
yeah.
What is it? You don't have to quote him directly. What did he say?
Let's see here.
Marty won't do it. He
He
wants.
says, accordingly, many monstrosities are begotten because the life-giving powers of the sun have been checked.
Yeah.
So the divine principle or instrument is thwarted by certain earthly essence of the flesh. Imperfections result, and a confusion of understanding of future events is conveyed through the spirit's manifestations. But he's saying life-giving powers of the sun.
The life-giving powers of the sun are what? Blocked?
Blocked by, yes.
He said many monstrosities are begotten because the life-giving powers of the sun have been checked.
And their days shall be limited to 120 years, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, this will be explained a little as we get further into this episode.
Well, this particular episode is over.
Yeah, well,
Damon Yoga.
Part B.
Part
this
B.
episode, part B.
Yeah.
There's so much in this. There really is. There's, almost every paragraph has some little nugget of value in it. At least, for the pareidolia that I have, that I connect all these different things, right? That may or may not have legitimate connections, but they certainly, in this case, seem to be quite coherent, and seem to be restating the same observations or beliefs. So I would say that this everything we've read so far strongly suggests that these people were having very similar experiences to those being described by, people today in all sorts of these different guises, whether it's, alien encounters or spirit encounters or, poltergeists, all these different things.
All right. Okay, so we'll tackle the second part of this, I guess, after the summit. Cosmic Summit's coming up.
3 weeks from now?
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks from now.
We had to wait that long? We got something next week?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. We can do it right
Come up
after.
with a plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could also record it in advance.
We could do that too, yeah. Well, thanks, Marty. It's always you always deliver some crazy stuff to think about.
Yep, I love
really
the
good.
concepts.
Yeah.
It only gets crazier. I promise.
What's the term? We're going to be called, what was the term that people get called when they believe these things?
Melancholy dizzards.
Yes. We're all melancholy dizzards.
Yep.
All right. Thanks to all of you guys out there who listen. We love you.
We always have.
We always will.
Good night, Atamu.
Get back to work.
All right.